I feel like a common theme in a lot of the books that we're reading is that like moms don't have support anywhere they live. We cheers?
Yeah. Cheers.
Okay, cheers. In person. Yay! In person. So nice. All right.
All right.
Into it.
Okay. Well, welcome back to Straight Up Book Club Season 4. We'll never get that right either.
That was
I
right.
started like every episode being like, I'll never get something right.
But it was right.
Yeah. But I just second guess myself though.
Go boldly into that good night. Oh, that's like the go lightly thing that's going to come up.
Ooh.
Ooh.
Yeah. I like that. I did love that part of
I
it.
love that part too. It actually made me tear up a
Yeah.
little. Okay,
Yeah.
yeah, well actually.
Okay, well, welcome back, and this is the vibe. We've had a couple of drinks. Okay, season
It's giving
4,
real book club.
episode 4. We're reading The Rest of Blue Sisters by Coco Mellors. So the second half after chapter 8. In my head, I was like, season 8, episode 8, chapter 8. It's like third time.
Okay, doing the intros, you got to remember a lot of numbers though, so good for you.
All right. Well, okay, what's happened now, Heather?
So much has happened. Okay, so the last time we left off, Lucky was leaving London. She was staying with Avery. They had a fight. She was on her way to New York to see Bonnie, and that's kind of the moment where we left off. Lucky gets to New York. Bonnie discovers that Lucky is not in a good state. She sees how frail she is, how unwell she is. She knows that she probably has a substance abuse problem, and she helps her get sober. And this takes like at least a week. Lucky clearly, honestly, I don't think I realized how much of an addict Lucky was until this moment when she's going through these like severe withdrawals. And in that week, Bonnie really helps her through it. Bonnie actually gives up some like, is it sparring or sparing? Sparring
Yeah,
opportunities in boxing. She had like a sparring opportunity with someone, and I guess she just kind of like neglected that for a little bit in order to help Lucky through her sobriety. And then Avery shows up out of the blue. She doesn't tell them why she's there, but she's like decided to take some time away from London. We find out from Avery's perspective that she actually left because Chidi did approach her on the affair that we had talked about in the last episode, and Avery admitted to it. They had a discussion. Seemed like a very sweet kind of like undoing of a relationship where they spent the night together, but then the next day.
Cannot relate. Like, jeez.
Yeah, honestly, if I was Chidi, I would have been like, get the fuck out of my house. But
Yeah.
because they paid for that house with the down payment from her like grandfather, I think it was. And like, sure, Avery was supplementing the mortgage, but like, come on. I don't know. That whole thing was gross. But Chidi was being very sweet about it. And they kind of spent the night together. The next day, Chidi had moved into the guest room, and then after a week she went to Avery and was like, you have got to get out of here, go to New York, your sisters are there, that'll be like a place for you to figure things out and time for me to figure things out.
Yeah.
So Avery's now in New York with them. Lucky is sober, and Bonnie can go back to boxing, and everything seems like it's okay. But then there's a huge blow up between Avery and Lucky. Bonnie's like kind of involved, not really, typical middle child. She's like, doesn't want to take sides. I can say that because I am a middle child. The blow up happens, and then Lucky storms off. Bonnie gets really mad at Avery because she's like, I've worked so hard to make her sober. And Avery's like, you can't make someone sober. That's up to Lucky to decide. So whatever happens, happens. Lucky goes off. She meets one of like, it's like a former model that she was friends with. Riley, I think his name is.
Yeah.
He invites her out for drinks, and she kind of like withstands it for a little bit, but then she's like, fuck it, like fuck my sisters, fuck everything, fuck sobriety. And she ends up drinking, making a fool of herself, waking up in Riley's room feeling like ashamed. And apparently he had like he was very sweet, like he had taken care of her because he saw that she was so drunk, and he was genuinely worried about her. Meanwhile, Bonnie gets back into boxing, takes it really seriously. She ends up telling Pavel that like she's in love with him, and Avery goes up north to stay with their mother for a little bit. And this is the first time that we have seen any interaction with their parents.
Yeah. And we're craving this. I'm really glad we got some of this.
Me too. Like it felt necessary to me, especially because we got like the note where the mom had like come to the apartment, knew that they were there, but then like went back upstate without stopping to say hi to any of them. It's clear that there's like an emotional neglect there between the mother and the kids. Like she can't stand to be around them and their feelings is what it seems like.
Yeah, but I think that, you know, with some of this, when you're sort of almost like demonizing someone, like they've had moments where they've been really harsh about her, right? We have to remember that she is in an abusive relationship, and I was really curious to see like how Coco Mellors was gonna flesh out her character, because to your point, I think that is important here because she has played such a central character, even though she's absent. You know, just her absence is so loud. So I'm glad we got that moment. But it's so easy to demonize someone without knowing their part of it. So I'm really glad that we got to see her story of it too, because it sounds horrible to be in her shoes as well, you know?
She's also from the generation, and I want to know what you think of this, because Avery kind of asks her at one moment, you know, we know that Avery's wife, Chidi, her mother didn't want kids. Ganesh, is it Ganesh, I think?
Kanishka, I think.
Ganishka. And she's this like prolific documentarian in India, and she's like well renowned. And her fans love her, but her kids are a little like rolling their eyes at her because they know that she was a very neglectful mother. But at the same time, like they do think that she is very intelligent and good at what she does, and they see how her fans interact with her. And Avery was thinking about the fact that, you know, Ganishka never wanted to be a mother to Chidi and her brother. And she asks her mom, like, straight up at one point, like, did you want to be a mother? And her mom kind of admits that she didn't. But she's like, well, then why did you have us? And she's like, it was a different time, which Avery gives her a lot of shit for. But I also really felt for, because I do think that there's a generation of mothers before us that a lot of them didn't want to be mothers, but they didn't feel like they had any other choice. And like, what do you do if, you know, you're told that you have to be in a relationship with a man and you're not allowed to have birth control and you have kids? And what do you do if this isn't your calling? Like, it's just, it's quite sad. And this theme of motherhood keeps coming up in a lot of the books that we're reading. It happened in Ruth in the last book. It happened in Good Material was a big one as well.
Yeah.
And I think this like generation of motherhood that didn't really want to be mothers is like kind of powerful in its own way. Like, what did you think of that interaction between Avery and her mother, and her mom admitting this? Like, did you feel sympathy for the mom in that moment?
For Ganishka or for like
both? I was thinking Avery's mother. Who did we get her name? I'm not sure if we did.
Oh, I never remember. So.
I don't know. I don't think we got her name. But yeah, Ganishka and Avery's mom.
Yeah, it's interesting because, okay, so I think there's a few different like levels here, right? Because yes, like this is a newer sort of evaluation or like examination, like, do I want to have kids? You know, like that's not something that was available to a lot of women pretty recently, actually. But on another level, it still isn't in a lot of countries. And so adding Ganishka into the mix really brings that up, right? Because that's still not really something she can, you know, she can think about, or like, so her decision there to like balance career and life was to use boarding school. We see a lot of that around us too. You know, you use help to help sort of do everything. You know, you don't want to give anything up. You know, whether or not you really want every aspect of this life that you're building as strongly. That might vary, right? That doesn't mean that, you know, that you don't want the whole that you created. So I guess like in a long-winded way, what I'm trying to say is that what Ganishka wants most probably is her career, but it does sound like she's like also wants her kids, you know, like, so again, like I feel like there's this aspect of sort of like judging people, like without being in their head about it, or sorry, without hearing their story.
Mm-hmm.
And I think we never fully got Ganishka's story, you know, like growing up in like India, wanting a career, but then being expected to have children. What are you going to do?
We
You
didn't
know?
get Kanishka or Chidi's real stories either.
Yeah.
Wasn't that interesting? Like, also, I love how you said long-winded, which I feel like your version of long-winded is my version of succinct. So I love, please be long-winded. I love it. It's great.
I go into like tangents and I'm like, there's a lot of threads that I'm trying to tie together.
No,
Sometimes they don't
it
come
was-
together.
It was all, I agree with everything you say. Also, can we just agree that it like takes a village? Like you were talking about this earlier with moving. You're like, oh my God, it really takes a village. And I feel like a common theme in a lot of the books that we're reading is that like moms don't have support anywhere they live because
Yeah.
we've created this like capitalistic society where it's up to one person to take care of kids. When a long time ago, it was a literal village. Like that term comes from people.
Yeah, you need people around you.
You do need people around you. So, you know, I don't think that things like mental health issues or the desire to not be a parent is anything new, but I do think that we had like more support a long time ago and it doesn't exist anymore. I feel like there is this juxtaposition between this family and then also Chidi's family and Ganishka, and we're not getting their story. Like we're just getting these like little tidbits.
Yeah. Yeah, and there's so many characters in this story, right? Like you're getting everyone's tidbits almost, right?
Yeah.
And
Small moments.
yeah, but I love that so much because that's sort of how you go through life, you know people in a little way, and you kind of fill in the blanks a little bit, and like that might be right, that might not be. And I think that part of this book is really fascinating because it's about dynamics, and like that's really real, you know, like those are the dynamics that you have, you know. So like the person we meet going down to dinner, and like we're gonna, you know, we might have a conversation or whatever, we're not gonna, and we're gonna have an impression, you know what I mean. That I really enjoy when books emulate those relationships truly, because if we were to get every aspect of Ganishka's life too, it might be a bit much, you know. It
It would
might
be its own
like,
book.
Yeah, it's a side character. You don't need to know all of that, you know, and it's not the way you would encounter it in reality.
No, you're absolutely right. And they're also like, I'm gonna mess up what the line is, but it's like everybody's reality is from the lens of their own existence. Like the way that I live my life, and or not, that's not even the right way to say it. Like the way that I see the world is through the lens of my own experience, and vice versa. That's the same for you. It's the same for everyone else. And so we're really getting the lens of three sisters here.
Yeah.
And that's it. So we're seeing Chidi from the lens of Avery, and even Ganishka from the lens of Avery. Like we're not really getting, and even though this is third person, it's third person close. So we're really just seeing inside their heads.
Yeah.
But the moments with these other characters is very sweet. Like Pavel, like Riley, like Chidi. Even the mom and the father. That moment, like we don't get the father at all.
Yeah.
Like throughout the whole book. The funeral.
Yeah.
Can we talk about that?
Let's talk about the funeral.
Okay, so at the funeral, I can't remember whose perspective it's from, but they remember back to when Nikki died, and their father was obviously drinking that day, and he does a little bit of a toast for Nikki, and he says that when she was born, he really wanted to name her after Holly Golightly in Breakfast at Tiffany's, but he's like, I wasn't talking about it from the Audrey Hepburn movie. I was talking about it from the Truman Capote movie, where like she was actually a sex worker, and my wife was like, we're not naming our daughter after a sex worker, and I don't think that they used those words, but he said at her funeral, he's like, yes, her name is Nikki, but I always want to think of her as Nikki Go Lightly, and that's what I wish for you in this world, or outside of this world, to go lightly. And he says that for his other daughters too, like go lightly. My wish for like Avery, Lucky, Bonnie is go lightly, and he keeps saying it to a point where it becomes this like I'm getting goosebumps even recalling it, because it was very beautiful. It reminded me of the poem Dylan Thomas, Do Not Go Gentle into That Good Night. Like I think the line is like rage against the something. Anyways, but it's almost the opposite of that. It's like, be light, like find a lightness in your life. And there was something
Yeah.
really beautiful about that for 3 women and 4 really whose existence has not been light so far. That was the part that really killed me. But anyways, I want to know what you thought about that.
The part that killed me was that he ended up naming her Nikki after, you know, this book that's really about an author's wife's like struggles with addiction. And then the wife is the person, well, you know, the author is like, that's not what happened in real life for this author, is what I mean. But anyway, so Nikki was the character that like beat it, right?
Yeah.
Like survived and was triumphant in the face of addiction. And like that's hard to be a father and to be like, oh, I named my kid, and then that is actually what she succumbed to. And you know, I don't, as a, no one else may see that connection, but as you, like you and your partner who named it and your kid, you know, that's hard. You know, everyone in this book is blaming themselves for Nikki's death.
That's
even
true.
her father in this moment.
That's so true. Let's talk about that a little bit, because I do think that that's such an interesting thing. And they kind of come to this at the end. All 4 sisters in the end kind of get together in this moment where they're admitting, I guess, all their faults and all their own guilt. And we hear that, you know, Avery feels guilty for leaving them, because she did leave, and that's when she succumbed to a heroin addiction. Bonnie feels guilty because she feels like, well, we find out that Nikki had called her. I don't think we've addressed this yet, but Nikki had called Bonnie to say, I need some painkillers. Her endometriosis was acting up. It was really bad. She had become reliant on painkillers to get through it. And she had called Bonnie being like, can you get me some painkillers from the gym? And Bonnie said no. Bonnie didn't know like how severe this was. She thought it was like, you know, she just needed something to get by. She didn't think it was like an addiction, and that she'd go buy someone on the street, which ended up being fentanyl. And that's how she ended up dying, was from a fentanyl overdose. And Bonnie is the one who found her in the house dead.
Yeah.
And then Lucky feels guilty. I can't remember why Lucky feels guilty for her death.
Well, it's because there was a wishing tree, and then Nikki had left a note saying no more pills, and Lucky didn't know what that meant, and she asked Nikki about it, and Nikki just kind of brushed her off and she let it go. But she feels like she should have pried more or known more, you know?
Yes, that's right. That's so sad. And then we also find out that the father feels guilty too. And then I didn't even think of that until this moment, but the moment with the mom and Avery when they're talking, and Avery admits to the mom that she feels so guilty for Avery's death, and her mom goes, no, sweetie, you aren't that important.
Oh my gosh. This is not okay, this is not the first time in my life that I've heard that. And like I don't know if I read it or heard it or watched it, but the first time I saw that, it was such a like an eye-opening moment.
Relief.
It was relief, but it's also like yes, because it's like it's taking away responsibility.
Yes.
You know, we overanalyze things. We think I might have said something a certain way. Why is this person acting a certain way towards me now? But it always goes back to you're not that important. People aren't thinking about you all the time. People are not doing things a certain way because of you, because you're not that fucking important. You know, we self-aggrandize, however you say that word, and like inflate our own importance. And that is why we obsess about things. And I don't know. It was just like so funny, or no, I mean, sad funny to like see this in this moment where, you know, it's a death and her mother's telling her you're not that important. So,
I loved that line.
Yeah.
But you're so right. It feels like a wash of relief. Feels like something I need to like remind myself of all the time. Like when I worry about if I, like you just said, like I said the wrong thing or I did the wrong thing or XYZ is going to happen because I didn't show up in this way or that way. At the end of the day, you're not that important. You're not. At the end of the day, every person is in control of their own, you know, every person like makes the decisions based on themselves, not based on other people. It's not on us.
Yeah.
So it was a very like rash, very aggressive thing to say in the moment, but I think in a way, I imagine, because I don't think it went into like how Avery felt about it, but I imagine it was relief. Because didn't she say that to her sisters again after she was like repeated it to them or thought of it with them? Like, we're not that important. Like, none of us, all of us feel so much guilt over Nikki's death, but at the end of the day, that was Nikki. That was Nikki's demon, and there's nothing that we could have done, or there's nothing that we didn't do or did or could have done that would have changed the outcome at the end of the day.
The reason I loved this was we read A Little Life like last season, 2 seasons ago, and this question came up for me, and I obsessed about it a little bit. I was like, what are the ends of your responsibility? How responsible are you for the people in your life, whether it's your siblings, whether it's your friends? Like, what is your responsibility? And, we had that conversation there. And so in that, like, to close that out, this feels very like you're not that important. You're one like part of a person's life. Yeah.
Yes, exactly. No, that I love the way you just put that. You're only one part of a person's life. At the end of the day, each person has a multitude of people making up their lives, but at the core of it, it's them, and no one small part can make or break that person.
Yeah. Yeah. And and as tragic as it is, like, there was nothing that they could have done to stop it or alleviate it. Those are her choices. Like, she really wanted children, and she had the surgery, but she didn't want the surgery.
And she knew that she obviously knew that it was a problem, because she wouldn't have written that note on the tree, no more pills, if she didn't know that it was something that she needed to give up, you know?
Yeah.
So.
Actually, that's the other thing, like, I wanted to talk about. I feel like we're almost at time. I forgot to set a timer, but I think
it's okay. I feel like the second half is like it's the heavy half.
Yeah.
The first half was action. The second half was like, how are we unpacking this trauma?
I want to talk about the relationship to just addiction. Like, in this half, we really find out about, the dad was really struggling for a long time. Nikki was really struggling for a long time. Lucky is too, and she's in denial about it. And Lucky's at that age where you're like, oh, it's kind of cute, but then it stops being cute, It's like,
I think they say
gray
that.
area.
I think they say that in the book, yeah.
Yeah, and like Avery is interesting because she does have an addiction still. Well, I mean, she's an addict, but she has an addiction to a different thing now, which is like stealing, like the 5-finger discount, right? She talks about like how that's a replacement almost, right? So it feels like the more they try to like bury all of it, the more it sort of like comes back at them, like Avery has made such great strides, but like something else is cropping up for her now,
Lucky at the end, we know, is like actually in and out of rehab, because in the 10 years later, it's like 60 days she's been sober.
Yeah. I thought that was really good because it's very real.
I agree. And at first I felt like it was all wrapping up a little too tidily. Do you know what I mean? Where it was like Bonnie finally confessed her love to Pavel, and they're like in love, and Avery confronted their mother and is, even though her and Chidi divorced, she's in a new relationship. She and Chidi still have a good relationship in the sense that Chidi calls and like attends her lectures and stuff like that. Like, it's a very sweet friendship now. And then
that's hard to believe. I don't know. Who's really friends with her?
Is that like therapist vibes? I don't know. I don't have any friends who are therapists. I have a therapist.
Sometimes it's healthier to let go.
I do agree. I think that you can just, Chidi, if you're a people pleaser and you're just doing this to like fix Avery, like, let go, move on with your life. You have a son now. You're thriving. But I did feel like it was feeling a little tidy, and then the way it was not saying what was happening with Lucky, where it was like, oh, she checked out early. I was really worried it was going to be like, and she was, what are they called? Like, I don't know, like a nurse or something at a
A
at an
rehab
addiction. Thank you, at an addiction facility. But then they're like, nope, she's actually only about 60 days sober because she's relapsed, and it sounds like she's a musician now. And I was grateful for that.
So that person that stopped her on the street was because she fell off the stage, and I was like, was that from like a while ago? But that was more recent.
Yes.
So yeah, it's a journey. So like you can't wrap like clean bows around that, and it wouldn't be real. Yeah.
I do know from reading a few articles about the author that the author actually is, I guess I will say is an alcoholic, because I think the term is like once an alcoholic, always an alcoholic. I think that's what they say in AA. If I'm wrong, like please tell me and I'll change what I say. But she is an alcoholic who has, struggled with addiction. She's in recovery. She's fully sober now. She has a son, flourishing life, and she really wanted to write a book about addiction because she felt like it was something that, wasn't really touched on a lot. So I do think that was a very insightful thing at the end to have Lucky, not someone who's been sober since that moment with Bonnie, but, she's trying. And we're seeing her trying, and that's a really beautiful thing.
Lucky is like, okay, that moment she had with Riley, also Riley.
Oh, fuck.
It's limited.
Do we need more names? I think someone needs to come up with new names. Like,
how about let's just like stop using so many white names. But like that,
some diverse baby books. Keep going.
Yes. Last episode we talked about how there's patterns and like who the other people in their lives are. So the powerful figure or whatever, person of power, figure of power.
Yeah.
So we talked about that for Avery and also Bonnie, but for Lucky, it's almost like, we have this person who's giving her a lot of grace, and Avery also has a person who's giving her a lot of grace, which is Chitty. For Lucky, Riley shows up with a kindness that she just hasn't experienced. And it's really interesting because at first it seems like she's going to open up to it, but then she has a really like, it almost becomes one of her triggers, right? And so she like, it almost becomes like a way for her to slip back in really easily. And I found that really interesting because she's almost like trying to open her mind to being with this guy. But in a way it's too related and it's too reminiscent of her patterns when she is like, on a bender, for example. And then she has this moment where she does a lot of shit that's just not okay.
Yeah.
And he's still there for her. He comes back for her. He takes care of her. And it's really sad that, like, he, like, really steps up and then sees that she's not okay. You know what I mean? Like, it's very, like, rare for someone to see that you're not okay. So I really enjoyed that. There is goodness sometimes.
There
even in
is
the worst.
goodness. I do think that there is. And like Riley is a testament to that. I also think like Riley is a little bit like Chidi in the sense where they're both like almost too forgiving, where it's like you really could have told them to fuck off and they would have deserved it. Mm-hmm. But I think that they're both a testament to the kinds of people who see through the things that happen when you're an addict, and because I do think that like with addiction comes a level of protection that can kind of end up being a little bit of like self-sabotage. And we see that with Avery, with her relationship with Chidi, because she didn't even love the guy that she had sex with. Like she just, I think, wanted to blow off steam or try something different, which is similar to what like Lucky really acted the way she did in front of Riley to kind of like almost like test his alliance to her. It's what it felt like anyways. I don't think it was ever actually said that way. So I do think there are just people out there that are so good that they see through that And like, God bless all the people who are like that. Because Lord knows Nat and I would be like, fuck you, get out of here. But
I don't trust you.
there is a goodness there. And I do think like, you know, it is important that those people exist, because I do think that they're the people who can like kind of remind others that like,
yeah,
there is good in you, if that makes sense.
yeah. And it's also like, at least for Riley, like, to be in a toxic environment like that, it helps to be, you know, so centered in yourself. And, you know, must have been a good upbringing. You know what I mean? Like a good family life where you're loved and tucked into bed every night, and like, it's rare. Well, I say that, but I was tucked into bed.
Sorry. I was too, actually, to say our prayers. I am very curious about what you thought about the ending, because I, for one, am skeptical about ending something with a birth. Like, I feel like it's like a little cliche. It's a little eye roll. It's a little, oh, someone died and now someone's being born. And at first I didn't like it. But then I reread it, that last part where it Bonnie, because the very last moment, 10 years later, Lucky's leaving rehab and Avery is headed towards the hospital to see Bonnie, because Bonnie's just given birth to her first child. I shouldn't say first child. Bonnie's just given birth to a child. And we get the perspective from the baby. And that's, I think, what made me okay with it. It's like that last paragraph, it's the baby taking in the love around them, like the three sisters, the mother who's a part of the three sisters, and being like, this is good. I'm doing this. I'm doing that. Like, what was the last line? I can't remember. And at the very first reading of it, I was like, ugh, I don't know if I liked that. And then in the acknowledgements, the author said that she originally had a different ending. But then when she gave birth to her son, I believe it was a son, she rewrote it to be like this. And I was like, okay, let me give it another read. And then I did, and I really saw it from the baby's perspective. And then I was like, okay, this is actually very sweet. But I'm very curious to know what you thought about it. I'm just going to I just want to read the very last line, because I do think it was quite sweet. It's a long paragraph, so I won't read the full thing, but the last bit. She was safe at their center. Something soft stroked her cheek as she drifted. That was good. She could still hear them, and she liked that. Laughter. What a good sound. She wanted to hear more, but she was drifting away. She would come back again soon. She would not be gone long. The darkness deepened. The figure circled her. This place was good. She would stay. Ooh, okay. Now I'm going to cry. Because it was like different from Nikki. Ooh, see, now it's getting to me. Now I'm like totally okay with the ending. But I'm curious to know what you thought about the ending, and including a birth after so much talk around mothers not wanting daughters. And the three of them even have the conversation in the very end when they're all making up about whether or not they want to be mothers. And all of them say no. And the only person who says maybe is Bonnie. And she says, you know, like, my career doesn't really allow me for that, but like maybe someday I could. And she is the one to end up having a child, which I do love the author's recognition of the authenticity of like people knowing what they want. And she went with the one who was like, maybe me. But the other two were like, no, we didn't have kids, which I appreciated. Thank you, Coco Mellors. That's great. Yeah. But anyways, I'm rambling now. I want to know what you think about that ending.
Well, I thought it was really good for Avery's always had the responsibility, like, to the end, where I think it was the beginning of the second half where she was like struggling with the idea of not wanting to have kids, you know, because we know that for a while Chidi really wanted to have kids, but Avery was saying like maybe, but truly she didn't. You know, she just wanted to want them. And a big part of that was because she's struggling with the idea that Nikki wanted kids, right? So it's like, yeah, it's really sad. Like, Nikki wanted kids so badly that she would rather truly die, you know, than like not have them. And now that that's happened, like, I get it. I get where Avery's like, who am I to not want to have kids? You know what I mean? Like, it's just like, that's such a
feeling.
difficult place to be where you're like, okay, well, I have a choice and I don't want it, and that's okay too, you know what I mean? And so I feel like Bonnie having a kid takes that off of her. And I know, like, it's not like none of them needed to have kids, you know, it wouldn't have mattered, you know, like Nikki, it was Nikki.
It was Nikki.
Yeah. Nikki's choices don't like just like, what's the word? It's just compute, circumflect. I don't know.
I think both those work.
transfer.
They don't. And I think
don't
at first that's
transfer.
why I had difficulty with it being a birth. I was like, why did you need this? This is about sisters. This isn't about having children.
Yeah.
But if you're ever skeptical about an ending, I think give it a second read. Also know the context, because the context of the author being like, I had a different ending, but then I had a child and then I rewrote it, I think always like means something. I don't know. I like to know those tidbits.
Yeah, I did really like that line. Like, I think I will stay. It's also just like, you know, oh, one other thing I wanted to talk about was the relationship to hope. So I feel like we're ending back on hope. Just quickly, I know we're over.
Oh, who cares? We're having fun. We have wine left. Let's keep chatting.
Like they talk about, you know, Bonnie and Pavel. Where it went sort of south for a bit was when Bonnie started to hope, right? And so there was like a few years that were really hard because of that. We also know that their mother like doesn't hope, you know, and she's kind of shut that away. And so she did have a moment of hope where she was like, okay, maybe I could take my kids away from this man and I don't have to have them be subjected to this abuse. But it wasn't working out. So really the best plan that she had was to stay and keep them separate. So in that way she loses hope, right? Like she is kind of like, I have no way out, but all right, maybe the hope is that her kids can sort of still have a healthy, like, you know, childhood without her. She says, you know, I tried my best to keep us separate from you all.
That
you
part
know?
broke my heart.
Yeah, that was her way of solving for the whatever she was dealt, right?
She trusted Avery to just be able to like take care of them all, and it's clear that she's in so much pain after the death of one of her daughters.
Yeah.
The one that apparently she was closest to.
Yeah.
Anyway, sorry, keep going.
No, that was it, you know? So I think like maybe it's almost like a full circle where at the end we end with hope again, and like, you know, babies are like a symbol of hope and all of that. So
They really are. And I think that last line, like you said, like, I think I will stay, is kind of a bit of hope, isn't it? It's like the word think is there. It's not a full decision, but you're just kind of assessing the situation and you're like, okay, this is good. When something's good, you feel hope. You do. And it is quite a beautiful thing. Yeah. I really liked this book. I wasn't sure as I was reading it, the first half, but then I feel like once it ended and I had collected my thoughts, I did really like it. What did you think of this book overall?
I liked it a lot. When I found out that one of the sisters had endometriosis, I was like prepared to just bawl.
Oh, yeah, that was too real.
Yeah.
Yeah. No, I love a book that touches on endometriosis, because that's what I have, and I recently had surgery for it, and not a lot of books really touch on it. The only other book I've ever read that does talk about it is, it's one of Sally Rooney's books. I think it was Normal People. It could have been Conversation with Friends, but like one of the main character is on a train and she's just having like insane cramps and pain, and she doesn't know what's wrong with her. She goes to the doctor. She's told she has endometriosis, and I was like, oh wow, I've never read about this in a book before.
Yeah, it's pretty rare.
Yeah, but it's not a rare condition. Like 1 in 10 women have it, so it is really interesting that like the character in this did have it. So that I always feel a kinship with people in books that also have it. So
Like overall, I like this book a lot. I really like books that just like explore characters, you know, and we got a lot of that. And I don't know, something about the way this was written. I felt very immersed in it. I felt some books are really visual for me, and this was one of them.
Yes.
Yeah. I know I said with the last one, it felt very oral for me. Like I could hear it, and this one I could
See it.
Yeah.
Okay, I feel the same way, and I know this because I was struggling. When I saw their four faces and I heard about them, I knew exactly who everyone was. I was like, this is Avery, this is Bonnie, this is Nikki, and this is Lucky. It just makes sense because like she's clearly this like wonderful lawyer. Bonnie has this like fierce kind of competitive look. She looks like the person who's obviously going to die because she's so tragically beautiful. And then she's got the severe kind of like model look.
Yeah.
But then at one point it's like, oh, Bonnie and I think it was Lucky had blonde hair, and then Avery and Nikki had brown hair. And I'm like, no. That's not how I was picturing it. Don't take this away from me. And I literally had to have a moment where I just went, I'm going to pretend like this sentence never happened because I have this in my head already.
I was trying to piece that together too. So who had brunette hair? It was...
I definitely know Bonnie did have blonde.
Yeah, right.
Because I was like, it was short and blonde, and I was like, this is 100% Bonnie.
Okay, so then this has to be Lucky and Nikki because they looked like twins.
But then
right?
this is Avery?
Yeah, I think that's right. Avery was blonde, yeah.
That's not Avery to me. No, this is Avery. She's the like moody. I guess she does look like she's in pain. Sorry.
Okay, I gotta
Okay, maybe
say,
it makes
like,
sense now.
I feel like, you know, there's this moment where Avery's in a dress and Lucky's like, "You're in a dress." You know, like it just
that's
felt
me every
like,
time I wear a dress. People are like, "What are you wearing?"
No, but it's just like people like assume things about you, you know, and so that's what I feel like. You know, she's like, they're all like beautiful, but I feel like Avery is like,
Doesn't she
know?
look like someone who would wear a dress? And she doesn't?
You can't make those assumptions, Heather.
Fuck.
Okay,
I don't know.
Let's go to dinner.
Okay, yeah. We're at time. Thanks,
right.
everyone.
Wait, what are we reading next?
Oh. Here, Nat.
Okay, so we were gonna read Intermezzo by Sally Rooney, and you brought up Sally Rooney earlier. We're gonna read her very soon, but it's October.
Cozy.
Let's get into the spookies. So
I'm so into that.
this is The House in the Pines by Ana Reyes, not The Place in the Pines, which I thought at first.
I
and then
also
had to
thought
look
that.
it up.
I thought it was going to be the Ryan Gosling movie. I was like, sure, we can read the movie.
Okay, so we're gonna read this first half, you know the drill, and then we'll talk about it. And yeah, let's get ready for
Spooky season.
spooky season. It is almost Halloween, so I don't like Halloween.
Okay, put a pin in that. We're going to talk about that next. Halloween's my favorite.
See you next time.
See you at book club.
Bye.
Bye.